A professional assassin was hired to look for a boy, and when he discovers that the boy's father is a billionaire, he thinks of a better plan. But a twisted series of events shows us that the assassin and the boy have one thing in common. Let's see and find out. Hello and welcome back to I Am Movies. Today we're covering the 2023 South Korean neo-noir action thriller film known as The Child. The movie revolves around a teenage amateur boxer, Marco Han, who is desperate to secure funds for his mother's surgery. He frantically searches for the wealthy father he's never met before, traveling from the Philippines to Korea. In his relentless pursuit, he is forced to confront a shocking truth that changes everything he knows. But before we start, make sure to show us some love by subscribing to the channel. Now, let's get right into it. At the beginning of this movie, a man known as The Child has been held hostage by two men hired by a gang leader named Mr. Cho. While waiting for Mr. Cho's arrival, the child breaks free and effortlessly kills both men. Soon, Mr. Cho and his gang arrive. However, they also meet their end as Mr. Cho trembles knowing fully that the child is a professional assassin. Later that night, the child watches Marco Han fight brutally in an illegal boxing match. In the end, Marco ends up knocking out his opponent and emerges as the winner. After getting his prize money, Marco goes home to take care of his sick mother. The next day, Marco visits a man named Mr. Kim Seon-sang. Mr. Kim used to run a Kopino children's home, but had to close it down due to financial issues. Kopino is a term used to describe children of Korea and the Philippine mix. Mr. Kim has been helping Marco look for his Korean father, but hasn't gotten any leads. However, Marco gives Mr. Kim some money to hire someone in Korea to help locate his father. Later, Marco stakes the rest of his money on a football match between Chelsea and Burnley, hoping to raise money from it. However, one of his friends soon arrives at the place and offers him a job, which involves robbing a jewelry store. Marco seems not to be interested, but his friend keeps trying to convince him, and Marco says he'll think about it. That night, the result of the bet he placed came out, and Marco soon realized that he had lost. With this, Marco decides to give his friend's offer a shot. Marco is expected to cut the power to the jewelry store and distract the security guards, but on getting there, he soon realizes it was a setup as gang members attack him. Marco fights back for a while, then decides to run away after realizing that the gun he was given was blank. While running, Marco gets hit by a car, and the gang members stop chasing him. The owner of the car, Yoonju, apologizes for the accident and soon takes him to a hospital for treatment. While preparing to leave the hospital, Yoonju offers Marco some money and also expresses her surprise at hearing him speak Korean fluently. However, Marco soon leaves the building after Yoonju asks him if he is a Kopino based on his looks. On his way out, Marco gets a call from Mr. Kim and he quickly rushes down to meet him. Finally, Marco receives the news that his father, who is now ill, has been looking for him all along. Now, since Marco will have to fly to Korea to meet his father, Mr. Kim gifts him a Korean call card. The next day, Marco's father's lawyer, Kang Won-seok, visits him. However, the child keeps watching Marco. Soon, lawyer Kang gives Marco a file containing his passport and other documents that he'll need for his travel. He also provides a nurse who will take care of Marco's mother till he returns. In Korea, Marco's elder brother, who is mostly referred to as Director Han, receives a call from lawyer Kang that they are already on their way to Korea. Now, before this time, Director Han had been involved in some crime and money laundering scandals, which some media houses are now trying to use to extort money from him in exchange for their silence. However, Director Han soon informs his father that his mutt, referring to Marco, is on his way. Surprisingly, the child is also on the same airplane. The child soon approaches Marco as a friend and begins to say things that suggest he knows a lot about Marco's life. Marco angrily asks him who he is, but the child keeps insisting that he's just a friend, and even goes on to say that he may be the last friend that Marco would ever have. During this conversation, a hostess walks up to the child and asks him to go back to his seat. The child gets up to leave, but shortly walks back to Marco to tell him that he knows why he's going to Korea, and soon whispers a shocking statement in Marco's ears. After landing in Korea, lawyer Kang calls Yoonju to inform her that they've just arrived in Korea. However, she is right at the airport with Marco's half-sister, Han Ga-young. As Yoonju spoke with lawyer Kang, it soon became evident that Yoonju had sent some people to eliminate the friend that betrayed Marco about the jewelry robbery. Soon, lawyer Kang and the rest of his crew step into their car and get on their way. Meanwhile, Han Ga-young had asked Yoonju to get her a gun, stating that it might come in handy as she's preparing for the worst. The next day, two men are being brought to Director Han in an isolated place. One of the men who works with Director Han's family had leaked information about how Director Han had been laundering money to the other man, who happens to be a publisher. The two men had connived to use this information to extort Director Han, but their tactics were soon discovered. With this evidence, Director Han executes both of them. After that, a group of doctors led by Dr. Lee arrive at the scene, and Director Han instructs them to go prepare for his father's surgery. Lawyer Kang and his men are still on their way with Marco. Soon, the child drives close to them and signals Marco to wear his seatbelt as he continues to smile sheepishly at them. Soon, the child shoots the driver, causing the car to crash. He soon approaches the crashed car and finishes off the rest, except Marco. After this, he makes a call to Director Han and demands $10 million in exchange for Marco. After a while, Marco gains consciousness and soon sees the child. Marco begins to ask him who he is and why he's been after him. However, the child tells him that it will be difficult to explain at the moment, stating that he'll understand when he's about to die. This was the same statement he'd whispered in Marco's ears on the airplane. Marco gets scared and soon begins to run away as the child tries to shoot him. Marco continues to run and the child chases him with his car. After a while, Marco soon jumps from a bridge and narrowly escapes a truck. The child also jumps after Marco and begins to chase him on foot as they run through a tunnel. After coming out of the tunnel, the child notices that it's about to rain, so he retreats from his pursuit. However, Director Han begins to worry about the child's demand for $10 million, thinking it's the work of his father's rival. After much thought, he heads out to find Marco himself. Meanwhile, Marco finds a payphone and soon makes a call to one of the numbers on Lawyer Kang's card. In a twist of event, Yoon-ju, who's now driving, receives the call and soon turns her car around to meet him where he is. Marco also makes a call to Mr. Kim to inform him about his current predicament, stating that someone is after his life. However, Marco soon spots the child's car and begins to run again. The child uses his car to chase Marco through narrow streets but later gets stuck. Then he decides to chase Marco on foot, which goes on for quite some time. Marco gets tired, but won't stop running as his life depends on it. The child soon catches up with him and warns him to stop being uncooperative. However, soon Marco punches him in the face and runs away. While on the run, Marco spots Yoon-ju's car and she helps him escape. However, Marco doesn't recognize her with her glasses. On their way, Marco asks Yoon-ju what is going on, and she tells him that it is exactly the way he sees it. Then, she reveals herself to him. After realizing she is the same lady that had hit him, Marco asks her who she is, but she only answers him saying, "You'll find out before you die." Yet another shocking death statement. Soon, Yoon-ju spots Director Han and his men coming, and she signals to them with her headlight. Director Han spots her and immediately orders his men to turn around as they go after them. At this time, Yoon-ju reveals to Marco that the person chasing them is his brother. He is the one who ordered Marco to be brought from the Philippines. Soon, Director Han puts a call through to Yoon-ju ordering her to stop, but she won't take orders from him and dares him to catch up with her. They soon begin to give Yoon-ju a hot chase, but she sharply turns her car around, and the child also joins the chase. Yoon-ju keeps maneuvering through sharp turn, which proved difficult for Director Han's men. However, the child soon catches up with them, but soon loses them after narrowly escaping a truck. It is at this time that Yoon-ju diverts into a forest area, but Director Han's men miss her. While in the forest, Yoon-ju begins to reveal things to Marco. Yoon-ju tells Marco that his father, Chairman Han, has only 2 days to live as a result of heart failure. Chairman Han is the chairman of Seoul's biggest foundation, Hokyung Foundation, which owns several schools and hospitals around Seoul. Now, if Chairman Han dies, his son, Director Han, will lose the foundation to his half-sister, Han Ga-young. This is because Han Ga-young's mother, Jang, had gotten Chairman Han's will seal and vocal confirmation while he was unconscious, which makes her the sole heir to his fortune. This is why Director Han must keep his father alive at all costs to reverse the will. The terrible part is that they'd only invited Marco over to harvest his heart for Chairman Han to live. Yoon-ju also reveals to Marco that she has been paid by Han Ga-young to kill him before the heart transplant. Either way, he has to die. Immediately, Yoon-ju puts her gun to Marco's head, but the child soon hits Yoon-ju's car from behind. Fight suddenly breaks out between Marco and Yoon-ju as she tries to shoot him. However, Marco manages to escape from her with a gunshot wound. Soon, Yoon-ju shifts her target to the child, but he eliminates her eventually. Meanwhile, Marco, who is still trying to escape while limping, soon gets caught by Director Han and his men, and they immediately take him home for the operation. Before the surgery commences, Director Han decides to take a selfie with Marco and their father, stating that it would be the last one they'll ever have together as the Hans. After that, Director Han instructs his men to begin the operation, and they immediately begin to restrain Marco. As Marco begins to struggle, Director Han steps on his wounded leg, and they soon inject him to render him unconscious. Immediately, they strip him of his clothes and begin to prepare for the heart transplant. Meanwhile, Director Han watches the whole surgery from his room, but first decides to take a shower. However, while the doctors are cleaning Marco up, he opens his eyes in the process. This incident shocks Dr. Lee, and he blames one of the doctors. The doctor hurriedly picks up another injection, but to everyone's surprise, he stabs Dr. Lee, making it look like an accident. One of the security guys walks up to examine Dr. Lee, but they soon realize that there's an imposter among them. The child had sneaked into the house. He begins to kill the doctors as they all run outside. Later, 2 more security men casually walk in to check on the chairman, but the child closes the door and soon eliminates them. Soon, he lifts Marco and puts a robe on him. More security men storm in, but the child eliminates them. At this point, Director Han gets out of his bath and decides to see what is going on for himself. He soon arrives at the entrance with heavily armed men and asks the child if he was the one that requested $10 million in exchange for Marco, and the child says yes. At this point, Marco decides to ask the child what he plans to do next. The child tells Marco that they'll proudly walk out the door and points his gun at Marco as he leads him out the door. Director Han explains to the child that it will take a lot of time to process $10 million. However, the child says he'll wait. Director Han tries to beat down the price to $5 million, but the child tells him that his price is fixed. As they continue to bargain, Han Ga-young appears from behind and tries to kill Marco, leading to a heavy gun battle, with bullets tearing through the operation room. Soon, Director Han begins to shout at his men to stop as they could hit his dad or probably his brother. However, the child soon realizes that he got hit during the shootout. Later, they also realize that Chairman Han was also hit, but the child understands that he may not get his $10 million if the chairman dies. Now, after being informed of his father's gunshot, Director Han storms into the room to confront the child. However, the child decides to use the chairman's bleeding to his advantage while still holding Marco hostage. The child also reveals that he knows a lot of things about Director Han, including where he hides all his stolen funds. So, after going back and forth for a while, Director Han ends up sending the $10 million. Now, after receiving the funds, the child hands over Marco to Director Han. But while they're taking Marco away, the child tells him to cheer up that he won't die today as he limps towards Director Han and tells him that he'll put his money to good use. However, Director Han and his men soon put their guns up against the child. The child explains to Director Han that killing him won't bring back the money, but Director Han tells him that if word should get out that he was robbed by a nobody, he'll be a laughingstock. However, the child asks him if he prefers being dead to embarrassment, stating that he is a professional. This makes Director Han laugh, and he soon focuses his gun on the child's head. At this point, the child reminds Director Han that he's a professional and soon sends a warning to Marco, saying, "Get down, get down!" Immediately after this, the child begins his killing spree as he single-handedly takes down all the security men and shoots Director Han, leaving him to fight for his life. Director Han manages to sit on a couch and soon admits that the child is truly a professional assassin. The child soon begins to limp again as he asks for Marco's assistance. The child tells Marco that it's all over now and they need to go home. But as Marco continues to look at his brother with pity, the child tells him not to worry, that he has nothing to do with him. They continue to walk out, but Han Ga-young soon stops them and points her gun at them. Han Ga-young plans to kill Marco to eliminate all possible competitors. However, Marco angrily walks up to Han Ga-young and hits her in the face, stating that he'll never take her dirty money even if she fed it to him. But in a funny twist, she turns to the child and asks how much he is going to charge to kill Marco. This request surprises the child as he states that the whole family has bad blood, and turns to Marco to tell him that he is lucky he didn't get their blood. This is a big revelation for Marco, as the child spills the rest of it to him. It appears that the child was contacted by Yoonju to look for any Filipino kid in the Philippines who could stand as Chairman Han's abandoned son. In turn, the child had also visited Mr. Kim, who led him to Marco. This was why the child had been spying on Marco all along. However, the child had also promised Mr. Kim that he'll bring Marco back alive, stating that it will help him do something good before he dies. This is because the child has had a terminal disease all along and has only survived on medications. To Marco's surprise, the child was also behind how he met Yoonju through the accident. On hearing this, Marco angrily grabs him and tries to punch him in the face, but the child stops his punch, stating that Marco should be grateful he's not Chairman Han's son. Finally, the child reveals to Marco that he's also a Filipino, just like him, and soon begins to cough due to his illness. Soon, they both walk out of the house limping, and the child asks Marco to drive. With this money, Mr. Kim is finally able to rebuild his Filipino children's home, and Marco gives his mother better healthcare. Later, the child visits Marco and they both take a stroll. The child tells Marco that it could be their last time seeing since he's dying, but Marco advises him to see a professional doctor for help, since he had been visiting an unauthorized doctor secretly for medication. The child finally takes Marco's advice and soon visits a professional. Soon the doctor says what he's feeling is just normal, since it is a cause of withdrawal from quitting smoking. He realizes that nothing was wrong with him all along, and the medication he had been buying from his old doctor was just vitamin C. On hearing this, the child starts to laugh and the movie ends. The story teaches us that even in the darkest of circumstances, unexpected alliances and acts of kindness can emerge. It reminds us to be open to understanding and forgiving others, and to give them a chance to show their true selves. This is a valuable lesson about the potential for human connection and empathy, even in the most unlikely of situations. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this recap, and subscribe to stay updated for the next one. Until next time.